The mile marker that never moved. I have been driving long-haul routes across the United States for almost 14 years. Most people think truckers are afraid of accidents, icy roads, or sleep deprivation. That's not what stays with you. What stays with you are the nights where the road feels wrong. The kind of wrong you can't explain to dispatch without sounding insane. This happened to me in late October, somewhere between eastern Wyoming and western Nebraska. A stretch of highway so empty that your headlights feel like they're cutting through a void rather than darkness. I was hauling refrigerated beef from Boise to Omaha. Standard run. Weather was clear but cold enough that my breath fogged the windshield every time I cracked it open. Around 1:17 a.m., I passed a green highway sign that read, mile marker 191. I remember it clearly because I'd been counting down to my next fuel stop. I tapped the dashboard and muttered, almost there. Then I kept rolling. About 15 minutes later, something felt off. My GPS said I had driven nearly 20 miles, but the fuel estimate hadn't changed. That happens sometimes, so I didn't panic. Then my radio crackled. Not music. Not dispatch. Just static with a low, wet popping sound, like someone breathing through a mouthful of water. I turned the volume down and focused on the road. That's when I saw the sign again. Mile marker 191. Same scratches on the metal. Same bent post leaning slightly to the right. I slowed down instinctively. My heart started thumping harder than it should have. Roads can loop, sure, but not out there. Not on that highway. I checked the GPS again. It still showed me moving forward at 65 miles per hour. I told myself I was tired. Hallucinations happen. So I slapped my cheek, rolled the window down, let freezing air burn my lungs. I drove another 10 minutes. The road was straight as a ruler. No exits, no curves, no overpasses. Just darkness and the rhythmic hum of tires. Then the radio came back on by itself. This time, it wasn't static. You missed your turn. The voice was calm. Male. Too close. Like it was coming from inside the cab instead of the speaker. I grabbed the MIC and asked who it was. No response. Just silence so deep my ears rang. I swallowed and tried to laugh it off, but my mouth was dry. A few minutes later, there it was again. Same sign. Same damage. Same impossible placement. That's when panic finally crawled up my spine. I slammed the brakes lightly, letting the truck slow without jackknifing. I stopped on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the darkness like a heartbeat. I stepped out of the cab. The cold hit me hard. The air smelled wrong, metallic, like old pennies and burned oil. My boots crunched on gravel that sounded too loud in silence. I walked back toward the sign. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in the truck, but I needed proof that this was real. The mile marker stood there quietly. I reached out and touched it. It was warm. Metal doesn't stay warm at night in October, especially not out there. I yanked my hand back and stumbled away. That's when I noticed something else. There were tire tracks in the dirt beside the road. Not leading forward. Not leading back. They led in circles. Hundreds of overlapping loops, like dozens of trucks had turned endlessly on the same patch of ground. My radio crackled again. Just keep driving. I ran back into the cab, slammed the door, locked it even though that made no sense. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys before shoving them into the ignition. I pulled back onto the road and floored it. The engine roared. The speedometer climbed. The GPS showed movement. And then, mile marker 191. This time, something was different. There was a man standing beside it. He wore a reflective vest like a highway worker, but it was torn and stained dark. His face was turned away. He lifted one arm slowly and pointed, not at the road ahead, but at me. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I screamed as I drove past him, eyes locked forward, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. In my side mirror, I saw him turn his head. His face was blank. No eyes. No mouth. Just smooth skin reflecting my brake lights. The radio whispered one last time that night. You're almost part of it now. Then everything went black. When I came to, my truck was idling on the shoulder. Dawn was bleeding into the sky, turning the horizon a sickly grey pink. My head throbbed like I'd been hit with a hammer. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it had all been a nightmare brought on by exhaustion. Then I looked at the clock. 6:44 a.m. Nearly 5 hours were missing. My GPS was frozen. Not recalculating, frozen. The map showed a straight line that went nowhere, like the road had been erased. The fuel gauge hadn't moved. Not a single mile logged. According to the truck, I'd never left mile marker 191. I checked the mirrors. The man was gone. The sign was gone too. Just empty road. I called dispatch with shaking hands and told them I needed to pull into the nearest stop. I didn't explain why. I didn't want the words to make it real. Dispatch told me the closest truck stop was 18 miles east. I asked if there had been construction crews overnight. There was a long pause. No, the dispatcher said slowly. Why? I hung up. I made it to the truck stop without seeing the sign again. The parking lot was half full, drivers brushing their teeth, grabbing coffee, laughing like the world still made sense. I parked, climbed down, and nearly collapsed when my boots hit the ground. The smell of diesel and fried eggs never felt so safe. Inside, I sat at the counter and ordered coffee I didn't drink. My reflection in the stainless steel napkin holder looked wrong. Pale. Older. Like I'd aged a year in one night. That's when an older driver slid into the stool beside me. Grey beard. Vietnam era cap. Hands scarred the way only decades of trucking can do. You saw it too, he said quietly. I didn't ask what he meant. I just nodded. He told me his name was Earl. Said he'd been driving that route since the early 80s. Back then, before GPS, before electronic logs, drivers talked more. Warned each other about things that didn't show up on maps. Mile 191 ain't a place, Earl said. It's a hold. I asked what it held. Drivers who didn't make it home, he replied. Earl explained that every few years, someone would go missing on that stretch. No wreckage. No calls. Just a truck found days later, parked neatly on the shoulder, engine cold, doors locked from the inside. And the mile logs? I asked. Never change, he said. Always stuck at 191. I told him about the faceless man. Earl closed his eyes. That's the marker, he said. It wears what it needs to. According to him, the land out there used to be a rest stop decades ago, back when drivers pushed too hard and slept wherever they could. A tired trucker fell asleep at the wheel, plowed into a group of drivers standing outside their rigs. None of them survived. They tore the stop down, paved it over, put up a highway. But the road remembers. And once it notices you, Earl said, lowering his voice, it tries to keep you. I asked him why I got out. He met my eyes. Because you stopped, he said. Most don't. I thought it was over. I was wrong. That night, parked legally at a rest area hundreds of miles away, my radio turned on by itself. The same voice. Calm. Close. You can't log out. Since that night, my electronic logs randomly reset. Mile markers repeat. Dispatch calls that never happened show up in my records. And sometimes, only sometimes, I see reflective tape moving in my mirrors when no one should be standing. I avoid that highway now. So do most drivers who know. But every year, someone new takes the route. And mile marker 191 is still waiting. The way station that was never open. I learned early in my trucking career that way stations are either a minor inconvenience or a major headache, but they are never mysterious. They are on maps. They have schedules. And when they're closed, they're clearly closed. That's why what happened to me outside Flagstaff, Arizona, still keeps me off certain routes after dark. This wasn't exhaustion. This wasn't imagination. And it definitely wasn't legal. It was just after midnight when my GPS warned me of an upcoming way station. I already knew it was supposed to be closed. My route notes said so, and every driver running west that week had confirmed it. Still, the warning icon flashed, and a new message appeared on screen. Way station open. All trucks must stop. That alone made my stomach tighten. The sign came into view a mile later. Bright. Too bright. Floodlights washed the desert in harsh white, like a stadium in the middle of nowhere. Orange cones narrowed the road. I slowed automatically, checking my mirrors. No other trucks. No patrol cars. Just me and the hum of my engine. I told myself it was temporary enforcement. I was wrong. As I rolled onto the scale, my radio clicked on. Kill the engine. Set the brake. The voice was distorted, mechanical, like it was coming through an old speaker buried underground. I did what it said. Truckers don't argue with authority voices at way stations. That's how you get written up, or worse. A red light flashed, then green, then red again. No one came out. Minutes passed. The desert went silent in a way that made my ears buzz. No insects. No wind. Even my engine ticking as it cooled sounded too loud. I stepped out of the cab. That's when I noticed the building. The way station office lights were on, but the windows were black. Not tinted. Black. Like paint. Like something solid was blocking the light from escaping. I walked closer, boots echoing on concrete that looked cracked and decades old. The door was open. No signage. No officer. Just darkness inside. Behind me, my radio crackled again. Driver, report inside. I hesitated. Every instinct I had told me not to cross that threshold. But my logbook, my CDL, my livelihood, those thoughts pushed me forward. I stepped inside. The air was cold. Freezer cold. And it smelled like dust and old paper. The lights flickered on by themselves, revealing a long hallway lined with inspection windows. Behind each window sat a chair. Every chair was occupied. Not by people. By uniforms. Empty highway patrol uniforms, neatly arranged as if someone invisible were wearing them. At the far end of the hall was a counter. On it sat a logbook, thick, yellowed, and handwritten. I opened it without knowing why. Names filled every page. Truck numbers, dates, and next to some entries, written in red ink. Failed inspection. My name was on the last line. Dated tomorrow. Before I could react, the radio on my belt hissed. Step on the scale again. The lights went out. The lights came back on slowly, like something waking up. I was standing alone inside the way station, my ears ringing. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined the uniforms, the logbook, the voice. Then I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. The radio on my belt crackled again. Return to your vehicle. I didn't argue. I backed out of the building, never turning my back on the hallway. The door shut behind me on its own, slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. Outside, the floodlights felt hotter now, almost humming. My truck sat on the scale exactly where I'd left it. The red light was on. I climbed into the cab and locked the door. My GPS had gone blank, replaced by a single line of text. Inspection in progress. Do not exit vehicle. The radio hissed. Begin secondary check. The truck rocked slightly, like someone had climbed onto the catwalk behind the cab. I looked in the side mirror. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Circling my rig. Each step landed a little out of rhythm, like the person walking had forgotten how legs were supposed to work. My air pressure dropped suddenly. Warning alarms screamed in the cab. I grabbed the wheel, breathing fast, watching gauges flicker like they were being adjusted by invisible hands. The footsteps stopped at my driver's side door. A shadow appeared. It didn't match any human shape I knew. Driver, the voice said, closer now. You are overweight. I almost laughed. My load was legal, perfectly balanced. I told them so, my voice cracking. Silence followed. Then the shadow leaned closer. You are carrying too much. The passenger door handle moved. I screamed and hit the horn. The sound blasted across the desert and cut off instantly, like the air itself swallowed it. The handle stopped moving. The shadow slid away. The radio crackled one last time. Final result pending. The scale light turned green. My engine roared to life without me touching the key. The truck rolled forward on its own, steering itself back onto the highway. I fought the wheel, heart pounding, until control snapped back into my hands as suddenly as it had been taken. Behind me, the way station lights went dark. Gone. Like it had never existed. I drove until sunrise without stopping. At the first real truck stop, I checked my logs. A new inspection entry had been added automatically. Status. Passed. But beneath it, in smaller text, barely visible. Next inspection. Pending. I asked other drivers about the way station near Flagstaff. Every one of them said the same thing. It's been closed for years. One old driver looked at me longer than the rest. Did you see the uniforms? He asked. I nodded. He shook his head slowly. Then don't ever run heavy again, he said. They don't mean weight. I still drive. But every time my GPS warns me of a way station at night, I slow down. Because some inspections aren't about your truck. They're about whether you're allowed to keep moving. The sleeper cab knock. If you've driven long haul in the US, you know the sleeper cab becomes your whole world. It's your bedroom, your safe place, the only thing separating you from whatever's waiting outside at 3 a.m. That's why every driver has a rule about knocks. If someone knocks on your cab at night and you're not expecting anyone, you do not open the door. I learned that rule too late on a winter run through southern Illinois. I was hauling dry goods eastbound and shut down at a nearly empty rest area just after midnight. Snow fell lightly, coating the lot in white that reflected the orange glow of the lights. I backed into a spot near the trees, killed the engine, and climbed into the sleeper. The silence after a long drive felt heavy but familiar. I checked my doors. Locked. Curtains drawn. Heater humming. Safe. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when the first knock came. Not loud. Not urgent. Just 3 slow taps. Knock. 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 Right behind my head. I froze. Every muscle locked up. Truckers hear noises all the time. Airlines popping, wind shaking trailers, but this was deliberate. Human. I checked the clock on my phone. 2:13 a.m. I held my breath and waited. The knock came again. Same rhythm. Same spot. I whispered, "Yeah." Nothing answered. Then a voice spoke from inches away through the cab wall. "Driver, you awake?" It sounded tired. Polite. Like someone who didn't want to be rude. I stayed silent. My heart pounded so hard it shook the bunk. The voice sighed softly. "Good," it said. "That makes this easier." The handle on the passenger door moved. Slowly. Testing it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, keeping the screen dim. No signal. Just a spinning wheel. Outside, snow crunched as footsteps moved along my trailer. Each step was careful. Like whoever it was knew exactly how loud they were allowed to be. They stopped beneath my sleeper window. The knock came again, this time harder. "I know you're in there," the voice said softly. "I can hear you breathing." I pressed a pillow over my mouth. Tears burned my eyes. The heater shut off suddenly, plunging the cab into cold silence. Frost crept across the window from the edges inward. "Please open the door," the voice whispered. "I can't knock forever." Something scraped along the side of the truck. Not fingernails. Metal. Like a tool being dragged slowly, patiently, toward the sleeper. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed. Then, the knocking stopped. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under like a tide. When I woke up, it was morning. The rest area was full of trucks. Normal sounds. Engines starting. Doors slamming. Life. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I opened my curtain. On the outside of my sleeper cab, right where my head had been, were 3 dents. Perfectly spaced. Like knuckles. Pressed hard enough to bend steel. I didn't call the police. I didn't call dispatch. I drove. I rolled out of that rest area with my hands shaking so hard I could barely keep the wheel straight. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Kids messing around, someone drunk, metal contracting in the cold. Lies you tell yourself so the road feels normal again. 10 miles down the interstate, my phone finally caught a signal. Missed notifications poured in. Weather alerts. A voicemail from dispatch asking why my truck had gone dark for 40 minutes overnight. I didn't answer. I couldn't explain what I didn't understand. I checked my mirrors constantly. Every shadow looked like a person standing too close to the road. At my next fuel stop, I inspected the sleeper cab in daylight. The dents were worse than I thought. Deep, oval impressions in the steel, edges spiderwebbed with tiny cracks. 3 of them. Always 3. Too precise to be random. Another driver wandered over, coffee in hand. "You get hail last night?" he asked. I shook my head. He stared at the dents longer than he should have. "Yeah," he said finally. "That's not hail." Inside the truck stop, I asked around without saying why. That's how you do it in this job. You let other drivers tell the story first. An older woman hauling mail leaned closer when I mentioned southern Illinois. "You hear knocking?" she asked. I didn't answer. She didn't wait for me to. She said drivers had been talking about it for years. Something that travels rest areas during winter months. Something that waits for trucks parked near trees or the edge of the lot. It knocks to see if you're awake. "Why?" I asked. "So it knows whether to copy you," she said. According to her, drivers who answer the knock don't disappear right away. They keep driving. Making deliveries. talking on the radio. But they stop sleeping, stop eating. Eventually, someone reports them for erratic driving. When the truck is recovered, the sleeper is empty. The doors are still locked from the inside. I asked what happens to the thing that knocks. She took a long sip of coffee. It rides, she said, until it finishes learning. That night, I parked in a crowded lot under bright lights. I didn't shut my curtains. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., my cab lights flickered. Then came the sound. 3 taps. From inside the sleeper. I spun around, heart slamming. No one was there. The knock came again, softer this time. Closer. Right behind my ear. "Driver," a voice whispered. But it wasn't outside anymore. It was using my voice. I covered my ears and screamed until other drivers started shouting outside. The knocking stopped instantly. Normal sounds returned. Laughter. Engines. Footsteps. But when I checked my sleeper wall, a 4th dent had appeared. Smaller. From the inside. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. Because the real ones don't end when the engine shuts off. Please like, subscribe now. These stories only find people who keep watching. And comment below. Would you have opened the door or stayed silent?